decision and the amount of money that are coming to the school districts and ours namely. And Maria Cañas is our research analyst, and she will be presenting to you what money is coming to the district and how much and where it all goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So Maria.
And I know that you're all not sitting close to me because it's me, it's the heat in the back where I feel listening here. So I'm hoping you can all see this and you can all hear me.
Yes.
Again, my name is Maria Cañas. I work for the Washington Education Association. I work for the Republic Education Association. I'm a research and finance staff there. I've been there for a number of years, but work on school district budgets, state impact, legislative impact, salary issues, insurance issues. So I'm going to do big picture, narrow it into Republic as it relates to their general fund spending, and then focusing on McCleary. And I'm completely okay with answering questions for clarity along the way. I think it's helpful, so please feel free to ask. So a little bit about the data. The data, one thing that's unique about Washington State is the school district's data is very transparent. There's rules and laws that reporting of information around budgets, school personnel data is all on the State Department website. So the data in this analysis comes from OSPI, particularly OSP is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's our Department of Ed. Particularly the school district budgets, their enrollment reports, state revenue apportionment reports, levy data. There's some tools out there that OSPI apportionment puts out for district, for them to project out year revenues. And there's one thing that was provided directly from the district via the association, and that's their current 18-19 budget. OSPI has now posted that online, but originally I got it directly from the district. So let's talk about McCleary first. Back in 2004, there was a WA Representative Assembly, Washington Education Association Representative Assembly. Each year, the Representative Assembly has anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 delegates. And at that assembly, they make decisions about plans for the upcoming next year. What they're going to, rules, things that new business items they're going to take on. And in 2004, the assembly voted to form a coalition to sue the state for failing to meet its constitutional duty to amply fund public education. It took some time between 2000 and 2004 and 2007. The News Coalition was formed, Network for Excellence in Washington School. 430 organizations were part of that, including school districts, educational service districts, labor unions, and the McCleary family out of Chimacum, Washington. In 2007, McCleary versus State was filed in King County Court, and in 2009, the trial was heard. In 2010, the court found for the News Coalition and declared that the state of Washington was in violation of the constitutional paramount duty to make ample provisions for education for all children in Washington. The state filed an appeal in 2011, and it went back to court. And in 2012, the Supreme Court in Washington unanimously ruled the state was violating its constitutional duty to amply fund schools. And between 2004 and 2017, there was a couple of court findings. And in September 16, the court set September 1st, 2018, so this current school year, as the deadline for fully funding. That was in September, the fall of 16. In 17, the legislature met, and the House and Senate passed a separate K-12 funding bill. And in this time, the state was making some progress. Transportation, K-3 funding, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. Materials and operation costs, but they hadn't done the last part, compensation yet. So in 2017, the legislative session, the K-12 funding plan made a map to fully fund. They said the first year, 18-19, will fund 50%, and in 19-20, we'll fund the second half to be fully at 100%. Well, this time last year, it was last fall or late summer, the court came back and said, no, you're not doing a 50-50. September 1st of 2018, you need to be fully funded. There's more seats up here if you want to come. Okay. So, 2018 legislature this past year fully funded the last portion, which is compensation. So you can see this is statewide. This is off of the governor's website. The first part of the, I think this red clip, transportation was fully funded in 14-15. That was the first part of the clear that was funded. 197 million statewide. MSOC was the next big chunk, nearly 1.2 billion statewide. That's materials, supplies, operating costs that's generated by the number of students that are in our district. 16-17, 270 million statewide for K, full day K. Before it was either tuition based or part of your full day K was paid based on your student population. The next big chunk came last year, 17-18, K3. That is 1.14 billion. And that means for every 17 students you have at the K3 level, you're funded one teacher. A lot of money went into districts at the, in 17-18. This current 18-19 year is the last of the full funding. Compensation, $2.1 billion statewide for compensation for this 18-19 school year. So that looks at big picture. Now I'm going to get into Republic School Districts numbers. One of the things with fully funding K-12 schools by the state, they said if it's more of a responsibility to take on funding at the state level, the legislature reduced the amount that districts could collect in local levies. Because they said if we're taking care of the fully funding, you can't collect as much at the local levy. So less reliance on local levy, more reliance on state funding. What this chart shows, the dark blue is the levy authority. That means how much Republic School District could collect from local levies from their voters. The lighter is your voter approved amount. So what's unique here is, the change in how much a district could collect doesn't go into effect till 19. So in 16, 17, and 18, the amount that Republic could have collected from their levy, they didn't collect at the max. They collect maybe half. Starting in 19, the amount they can collect is reduced. But since they were only collecting about half of what they could have, the impact of that change doesn't negatively impact Republic to the degree it does for other school districts. There are other districts. If Republic had been collecting at the maximum, you would have seen a much significant, greater drop in your local levies. But since you were collecting at the maximum, you don't see that drop as much, which is good for Republic. So this is state and local only. This is data partly provided by the district, part by OSPO. And what it does is it looks at the out-year projections of state and local funding. It's on a school year basis, and you can see in 16, 17, which that is actual data, Republic School District received almost $3.7 million from the state from funding, and about $500,000 from the local levy. So almost 4.2 million in state and local. In 17, 18, last year, local levy, or state went up, local levy went down a little bit. still about $500,000. The net increase, $337,000. 18-19, the first year of the state fully funding compensation and reducing the local levies. The net impact is $5 million estimated, about $500,000 increase over last year. 19-20, about $180,000. 2021, $105,000. The out years are OSPF estimates, OSPI, the State Department of Estimates, and it assumes flat enrollment. There's an option on OSPI's website when you pull this data to either say, our enrollment's growing, look at the out year projections based on growing enrollment. This is assuming flat enrollment. The change between 16-17, before the K-3 money kicked in, to 2021, the light blue is state, the green is local levy. The projected increase net between 16-17 and 2021 is $1.1 million, or 27% increase in funding. Again, this is the same data, different view. And the point of this is in 18-19, this current school year, the district will be receiving more in state funding alone than they received in total funding from state and local sources in 16-17, and equal to state and local sources in 17-18. So just from the state, it's picking up all the revenue for the past 2 years from state and local combined. But it's growing. Even with flat enrollment, it's projected to grow. Again, 1.1 million, or 27%. So the budget. From OSPI's accounting manual, a budget, their F-195 budget, where they lie out spending and revenue assumptions around enrollment, staffing. OSPI's manual says the budget is probably the most important single publication which any school system presents to the local citizens, which is you all. It's the instrument which sets forth a financial plan for the achievement of the goals and the objectives of a district. It is also the community's education plan expressed in dollars. So let's look a little bit about the budget. I start out with revenue because students drive funding. They don't, not only the number of students to the district, but the makeup of those students. If you have a high K-3 population, you're going to get more state-funded staff than if you have a higher 4th grade or 5th grade population. If you have students in an ALE program, you receive more funding. If you have free reduced price lunches, a high free reduced price lunch, there's program dollars that drive revenue to those students. And with the exemption, again, dark blue is budget, light is actual. With the exception of this year, actual students have exceeded budgeted levels. We just have 2 months counted for the 18-19 school year, and enrollment's slightly below budgeted. The district budgeted for 352, they're reporting 343. When a district receives or has more students than they budget, they receive more state funding than anticipated. What's also unique about Republic is they have small high school funding formula. So when there is a shift in their population, you're budgeting for 352, they're receiving funding for 343. Checking the model, the funding model, even with that change, that small school funding formula helps impact the loss of funding. So funding will be very close to the budgeted level, even with that loss. General fund, sourced by, revenue by source. 16-17 is actual. I don't have 17-18 actual data, OSPI, or excuse me. The district would have finalized that on the 15th of this month, and I don't have actual data yet. So I'm comparing 16-17 actual, 17-18 budget, 18-19 budget. And in total revenue, from 16-17 to 17-18 increased about 4.7%, and this year 16.5% increased about 839,000 from all sources. 79% of revenue, so for every dollar received, 79% of that, or 79 cents of that comes from the state. This chart looks at general fund revenue. Budget is dark green, actual is light. With the exception of 14-15, the district has received more revenue than they budgeted to receive. So it's similar to your student population chart. So for example, in 16-17, they budgeted $4.557 million in revenue. They actually received $4.852. The 4-year impact, total revenue exceeded the budgeted level by a combined $655,000 in that 4-year period. Revenue outpaced, actual revenue outpaced budgeted revenue. Looking at expenditures, in 2 of the last 4 years, spending was below budget. So revenue is higher than budget, spending has been below budget. During the last 4-year periods, $159,000 was spent below what they budgeted to spend. They're budgeting for increases in 17-18 and 18-19. So this is the relationship between revenue and spending. The first 4 bars, first 4 years are actual, 17-18 and 18-19 is budget. So with the exception of 14-15, actual revenue in each of the years was greater than actual spending. So if revenue exceeds spending in a year, the district builds up their fund balance. If revenue falls below spending in a year, they have to use the fund balance to balance the budget. So in 13-14, revenue outpaced spending, didn't in 14-15. 15-16, revenue outpaced it. 16-17, revenue outpaced it. 17-18 and 18-19, they're budgeting for revenue to fall short. I won't know that till I get complete data. But the net total, 424, 109, revenue exceeded spending. So I talked about the impact on fund balance. Because revenue exceeded spending, the district has built up their fund balance from a low of 14-15 in 2014-15 of 428,377 to 860,564 by the end of 16-17. So in that 2-year period, they've doubled the amount that's in fund balance. They're budgeting in 17-18 and 18-19 to spend that down, but I don't have final data for 17-18 yet, and 18-19 we won't know for a while. Looking at the relative size of the fund balance compared to total spending, in 16-17, the actual ending fund balance was over 860,000, and that equated to 18.4% in fund balance. So the percentage also increased each year and exceeded the budgeted level. One of the things that I got received directly from the school district through the association was their monthly fund balance reports. This is not available on OSBI's website, but what it shows is each month the district reports out to the school board how much is revenues received year to date, how much they spend year to date, and what is left in the fund balance. You can see that monthly and fund balance in 17-18 fluctuated above and below last year's, but based on August data that is not yet final, the district's estimated to end the year with about $773,000 in total ending cash and investments in fund balance. This is really small for you to read, but I'm going to now delve into the budget spending by activity group. So When districts report expenditures to OSPI, there's a couple ways they report it. One is by activity group. Teaching and teaching support is the core of spending within a district. It's the bulk, it's the classroom. It's your teachers, your teacher assistants. It's instructional assistants in the classroom. It's their employee-related costs, their salaries, their benefits. Teaching support might be your librarians, your nurses, your your counselors, if you have security. It's also computers, technology, and curriculum. Other support is your maintenance, your ground staff, food services, operations, bus services. Unit admin is your principal's office and your staff in your principal's office. And central admin is your district office. Your superintendent, your board of directors, if you have a business manager, or any supervisors of programs. Obviously, the largest piece of the pie is your teaching. Teaching and teaching support is the largest piece. And in 16-17, that represented 65.8% of total spending. So every dollar spent in 16-17, nearly 66 cents went into the teaching instructional program. Administration unit was 6.5, central is 6.7. Other support followed at 21%. But instruction representing 65.8, that percentage was below the statewide average, but above the average for similar sized districts of 64.9%. Looking at growth. So I'm just comparing, while there might have been fluctuations, I'm comparing the spending level in 13-14 by combined activity group to the spending level in 16-17. And when we compare the dollars spent in each of those years, spending on instruction grew by the greatest percentage. Instruction grew 18.1%, other support 2.2%, and administration declined. And those two outliers, the reason for that is, for instruction, you hired your ALE program group. You had about 7 FTE in students in 13-14, and that increased in 16-17 to about 60. So you hired staff, which would increase the spending in that area, and then K-3 came. You hired more K-3. Your administration declined in that time because you had more FTE administrators in 13-14 than you reported in 16-17. So that is a reflection of that. Looking at 16-17 actual to 17-18 budget, dollars spent in 16-17 to budgeted spending in 17-18. Spending across the board was budgeted to increase, with an administration spending growing at the greatest percent. And again, for that, that's the district hired back some of those administrators that were not hired in the prior year. Looking at actual spending by administration, below what? This is looking at your budget. So by activity group, when you compare what they budgeted to spend, which is here, to what they historically spend, it's here. So historically, on average, the district spends 1.5% less on instruction than they budget, 2% less on other support, and 3.3% on administration. So even though the growth has changed, the district spends more on administration than budgeted, less in other areas. So then, again, we talked about earlier about whether the budget represents an outline of the community spending on education. This would show that the budget represents less They spend less on instruction and other support and more on administration than indicated as a priority in budget. Comparing the 17-18 budget to the 18-19 budget by activity, spending across the board is going to increase, with the greatest percentage this year's budget is on administration, 40.8%, followed by instruction, 12.1%, 9.3%. Again, this is last year's budget to this year's budget. We don't have 17-18 actual yet to know what they spent in these activities. Now I'm going to look at staffing. There's three types of staff groups as reported by a district to OSPI through the personnel process. Instructional staff, which is your non-supervisory certificated staff, teachers, librarians, counselors, social workers, psychologists. Administrative is your superintendent, your principals, vice principals. Classified are your paraeducators, laborers, trades, clerical, bus drivers, custodians, food service workers. Looking at two snapshots in time, again, 13-14 FTE levels to 17-18. Your instructional staff increased 20.2%, classified 18.3%, and administrative 5.8%. Again, as mentioned earlier, the staff levels increased for instructional staff, who was due in part to the K-3 funding and your ALE program growth. This is looking at this card. So if you see the percents here, 20.2, 18.3, and 5.8 for the three staff groups. Enrollment in that time period has grown 8.6%. This next chart looks at the same percents. The gray bars is the growth, and then it looks at the dark is the budgeted growth in staff. So while the 18-19 budget anticipated fewer students, the budget reflected a decrease in FT students of 1.6%, which is less revenue coming in. The budget included increasing the number of FTE staff for all staff groups. Instructional staff, the budget includes an additional 0.9%, classified staff 17.8%, and 17.2% for administrative staff. So it's just kind of the, on the expenditure side, there's increases in spending. On the revenue side, there's decrease based on enrollment. So, a little bit on the McCleary, popping back to the McCleary decision and its impact on recovery. In the decision, the Washington Supreme Court ordered the legislatures to amply fund basic education, including compensation. That was the last part to be fully funded in 1890. These funding levels include for competitive professional salaries to attract and keep qualified, committed, caring, certificated, and support staff across the district to support the students' need to be successful. Changes in this 18-19 year. Prior to 18-19, school districts for their staff were funded on a state allocation model, which was a salary schedule. And it was reflective of the education and average education and experience of the staff. In 18-19, that changes for instructional staff. They are funded one average salary. For 18-19, that average is $65,216. A new schedule has to be bargained to meet the two parameters that have been identified in the law. They have to build a base schedule, all districts in Washington. A base schedule between the minimum of $41,760 at the bottom and a maximum of $91,710 at the top. And after 5 years, staff must be provided a 10% above the minimum requirement. That's the schedule's salary schedule structure to be bargained. Classified and administrative staff, nothing changed there. The levels, the dollar amount increased, but classified and administrative have always been funded on The other thing that occurred is regionalization, which raises allocation and salary parameters in districts with high housing costs. There are some in eastern Washington that received regionalization. I think Spokane got 6%. Republic did not qualify for regionalization. The other thing funded, beginning in 1819, is a phase-in of professional learning days. The state's funding 1 day in 1819, 2 days in 1920, and 3 days in 2021 for all state-funded staff to Republic. So what do the numbers look like? Again, the 3 categories: instructional, classified, and administrators. In 1718, for instructional staff, the state funded to Republic $58,004 on average. And in 1819, that goes up to $65,216. So that's a 12.4% increase in the allocation. In 1920, it's going up to $69,181. And one thing that Republic qualified for, with I think there's only about 34 districts statewide, an education factor. Most districts are just getting, in 1920, the IPD, the inflation of 2%. But Republic has a higher education and experience factor, so they get an additional 4%. So in 1920, that goes up to by 6.1%. ESP classified in 1718, the average level for funding was $34,180. It increased to $46,784, or 36.9% increase. 2% the following year, which is estimated IPD. Administrators in Republic were funded an average of $62,199 in 1718. That goes up to $96,805 in this current year. That's a 55.6% increase in funding for administrator, the administration allocation, and then 2% in 1920. That's an allocation. Money's driven to the district as an allocation. So what does that quantify as in dollars? There's a couple ways that that money's generated. One is through FTE staff units. So I mentioned earlier that students drive funding, staff units. There's a prototypical model. It's a model based on your student population. You get FTE staff units. And based on budget, through the basic ed apportionment model, Republic's going to receive funding for 23.054 FTE instruction staff, 6.785 classified, and 1.383 administrators. That generates funding for about $142,000 for instructional, $79,000 for classified, and about $44,500 for administrators. That is just the dollar amount associated for those staff units. There is other funding formulas that are increased by these higher compensation levels that don't drive out staff units, such as your ALE program. Your ALE program has grown, is at about 65 this year. And ALE funding also increased. And the amount driven out for ALE last year, based on each ALE student, the district received funding about $6,100. This year it's about $8,100. So that increase is $122,000 about for your ALE program. Those dollars can support salaries. Pupil transportation as well. The district's estimated to receive about $33,000 more in pupil transportation for compensation for your bus drivers, for your staff that work in pupil transportation. Those dollars are outside of this. Special ed is the other one. Special ed program dollars, about $45,000 more in special ed program funding to support the program, to support the staff. So the district may hire more staff in these areas, but there is other program dollars that support it, as well as federal funding that we saw earlier. So with this increase, 12.4% for instructional staff, the 142,000, districts around the area saw similar increases. And this is an example. I know this is hard to see. Republic's in the center. One of the things we do in the WA Research Department is we get all settlement data from around the state. We report it out on WA's website. There's a map out there. And that settlement data is gathered after a bargain, and that there's been confirmation from the district and the bargaining team as to what they bargained. So we compared total compensation bargain in 17-18 to total compensation bargain in 18-19, and do a cell-to-cell comparison about the average increase. Republic is one of the few in the area in this region that has not settled. I can probably see this better. Top left, Brown, Tonasket, they increased their 15.7. Above that is Orville, green, 19% increase. To the east, Kettle Falls, average increase was 11.9. Colville was 18.1. Chewelah, 17.1. In Chilean, or in Chilean? Chilean, 18%. OMAC, green was 13.5, and Okanagan is 12.2. So these districts dealt with the same financial McCleary impact as Republic. Many of them had a larger impact at the local level because they were collecting higher levies. But there was success, there was money to bargain, there was money constraints similar to Republic, but they were able to bargain these settlements. So in summary, Republic's enrollment is their trend is one of growth. 8.6% we saw on the chart. Growth means more revenue. This month, 2 months reported for this year, enrollment slightly below, but based on where your student population is falling, apportionment from the state is going to be very close to budget. Over the last 4 years, 16-17, back to 13-14, revenue outpaced spending by $424,000. As a result of revenue in excess of spending, that fund balance has grown to a healthy level. So outside of all this new McCleary money coming in, $500,000 this year, the fund balance has grown as well. Increases in student-driven FTE staff salaries estimated about $266,000 or 18.2%. That's for all your groups. Along with that salary money, the state funds mandatory benefits. So FICA, Social Security, it's about 24% on top of that is funded by the state. Compensation for pupil transportation, $34,000. ALE, $122,000, or 30.2%. So through all the analysis, the work I've done with Republic over the last couple of months, following their data, following their budget, the district has sufficient resources available to make improvements to the learning environment for students and the working environment for staff. And I drove out with my colleagues here at the Republic. I've been here one other time years ago, but what's most important here is the attract and retain piece. You want to attract and retain the best staff to Republic. And there's going to be competition. Depending on the bargain, you could lose teachers to other districts that are higher paid. Either now, current staff, retaining them is important, and then attracting new staff as your current staff retires. So that's a really important part of my analysis, knowing that the district's healthy, they have money coming in, their priorities are not really off, and that there's money there for. Any questions? None?
have a question.
Yes.
So the district makes quite a big deal about the 65,216 being the amount that's allocated.
Right.
And if I remember correctly from the last presentation I went, they basically said that their offer is the 65,000 or whatever I just said. Are you saying then that that's false, or are you saying that they should use those levy funds as they always have to supplement?
I'm not familiar where or what the last proposal is on the table from either side, to be honest. I'm saying that in all the bargains that I've received settlement data throughout Washington, we're at 229 settlements that we've tracked data for in federal way. There is not one district that is limited to just bargaining the 65,216. They're usually pulling money from other sources, local levies. Maybe it's a professional development day beyond that. Maybe it's a responsibility stipend for coming in and student conferences after school, or attending a your bargain more contracts, other after school activities. The 65,216 is an average, and depending on the makeup of Republic staff, that could look very different than the, depending on the makeup of Tenasket staff. Saying that if everybody was at the top in Republic, which I don't think they are, it'd be hard to be at an average of 65,216, or if everybody was at BA step 0. So most districts add more to their bargain package above what the state wants. And I don't know if Republic has, I have not looked at that. Yes?
Well, I know you don't know, my poor little head here is spinning. What is the offer from the school district, and what is the offer on the table from, I'm assuming there are folks here who are on the bargaining team. Could you share that with us, just so I could know?
Yeah.
So it's standard practice to not bargain in public, both from the district perspective and from the association.
Right, okay.
So in order to reach a settlement in those negotiations in a closed setting, so it's not something we're able to share with you this evening, so that we can try to work through the changes over time that happen through that negotiating process.
And so I read in the paper, I don't know when, but the district now is in mediation with the teacher. And let me preface this by saying that I'm a former teacher. Okay. So, and I'm part of a negotiating team when I was in West Washington. So I guess what I'm saying is, what's the issue? How is the mediation going to work?
Mediation works in that the state agency called PERC sends a trained professional who works as a liaison between the two bargaining teams to try to help find a settlement that both can agree to.
And that process is going on now?
That process has been going on since October 9th.
Okay. And how close are we to getting some sort of resolution?
Well, we've made some progress.
Okay.
We've made some progress. I wouldn't want to tell you any
Oh,
other way. We're moving in the right direction, but there are definite points that we are far apart on, and that's what we're hoping to resolve as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And your next session?
Next session is Monday.
Okay.
On Monday the 26th, starting at 9 o'clock.
Well, thank you to the negotiating team. It's hard work.
Thanks for your good questions.
Yes.
So there's 18% basically overhead for our school overhead funds that is not being used right now. Is that excessive for school districts to have that much overhead fund when their teachers are so underfunded?
So you're talking about the fund balance?
Yeah.
So, OSPI, I get that question a lot, what's the perfect fund balance? OSPI does not have a rule around, there's no law about that percentage level. to the chart you're referring to. This one. 18.4%. So they ended the year with 18.4%. I think that might come down in 17, 18. I think that for a district that size, it's a bit, for a district of Republic size, that is large. I wouldn't say it's excessive, but it's larger. If 79, 80 cents of every dollar received comes from the state, that's a given. Every month, revenue comes in, a portion of it comes in. Schools are not banks. There's no Bank of Republic. That money is intended to support the program in Republic, to support the students in Republic, to attract and retain staff in Republic. So more than the fund balance is looking how they spend the money they currently have. So we looked a little bit at that. I think with this new money coming in, the goal is going to be at the bargaining table to find a settlement. Because there's money to bargain in this new McCleary money coming through the state-funded staff as well as the ALE program that is not even going to impact your fund balance. I think there's settlement in there that's just going to factor in the money that's coming. Yes?
What can the public do to support the teachers, to let the administration, what can the public do?
Does somebody on the bargaining team want to respond to that? Talk to your, I would say talk to your board members. Talk to your superintendent. Talk to your neighbors and friends. Because, you know, you as a parent, as a family, you want to, those teachers have your kids the bulk of the day. You want to attract and retain the best, and compensation factors into that. Working conditions. So talk to one of the bargaining members. Yes.
In some of the charts that you showed that administration was rising 3.3% more than budgeted in the past year. And then one of the later charts showed an administrative cost of 55.6, and you made the remark that it was rising again. And I wanted to ask if the administration costs for this district are, in your opinion, similar to other districts, the administrative portion of
that. So you first were referring to,
they're kind of two separate parts of the same.
this is the growth in spending. This is where there's growth. If you look at how much was spent on administration in, no, that's not it.
There was, yeah, that's the one.
So spending, I think in those two snapshots, it shows that spending was less in 17, 18, excuse me, 16, 17, and 13, 14. And as I recall, in that time, there was a change in the number of staff you hired at that days. It dropped, and then it went back up. So that's reflective of that. If you look at the percentage of spent on administration as total, I don't think that they're far off than other districts. I think they're comparable to other small districts.
Okay, thanks.
The 50% you're referring to is state funding.
Okay, yeah, something was different.
So right now, with administrators, the district is funded for, per state-funded administrator, $62,100. And that's about what districts throughout the state are funded for their administrators, and we know administrators earn a lot more than that.
Right.
So that's a local choice. We want to attract and retain the best administrators as well. The state is now picking up more of that by that 55.6%. So often around Washington is districts hire fewer administrators than the state allocates and pay them more. usually for instructional staff, same with classified, they usually hire more classified, paying less. Instructional staff, because there was a state allocation model for so long, at least in base, they had to pay what was on SAM. It was the supplemental pay that will you increased money. Since that method went away, you're now bargaining all total salary. So if Republic, for instance, if they last year received funding for 62 for their administrators and they paid them 96, I don't know that they paid them 96, but let's say they did. They were paying 30,000 from other sources, the local levy, federal funding, whatever to bridge that gap. Now the state's funding it. That frees up money from other sources to address the other needs, program needs, classified needs, instructional staff needs. Any other questions? Great questions. Well, if you have a question and you don't want to ask in front of everybody, I'll be here for a little bit if you want to ask. Is there anything? I gotta go. You want to say?
Well, thank you for coming for the presentation. Like she said, she'll be here, we'll probably all be here for a little bit after. I'm sorry it's kind of so cold, but I guess it's winter.
This is Republic.
So, if anything else, if you would like to go home, you can go home. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for